Please welcome Dr. Ronnie Chatterji, Chief Economist at OpenAI, and Justin B. Smith, Co-founder and CEO at Semafor.
All right. In some ways, this is sort of, the panel that I know a lot of people have been asking me, when is that conversation with the chief economist with OpenAI?
Was that my mom backstage? She might have made her way back there.
No, it was not your mom, unless she was incognito. But anyway, we're really delighted to have you. Dr. Ronnie Chatterji is, as I said, the chief economist of OpenAI. Probably one of the most interesting and challenging, but also kind of historic jobs one could have right now, across the world. So, how are you holding up?
Well, first, thanks for having me, and I really appreciate everyone being here. For Semafor, it's something I read a lot because it connects a bunch of different themes that I'm seeing in my career that make it really exciting, but also really new and dynamic. So a lot of my work was academic. I'm an economist who studies technology and innovation, and a lot of my work focused on sort of the rise of things like the internet, new medical devices, and a lot of history going back to the steam engine, electricity. So I had a template to understand some of these new technologies. I also worked in government, and I ran the implementation of the Chips and Science Act program. And so I thought a lot about the supply chain for AI in terms of building the data centers, hardware, associated software, energy to make these things happen. And now I'm actually at one of the frontier labs at OpenAI and thinking about how we're going to put all these pieces together, right? And how is it going to affect our economy and more broadly our society. So it's a fun place to be. I'm learning a ton. I get to work with great people, but I really feel like it's using every different part of my career together all at once.
Well, it is truly a historic position in many ways. Obviously, I think there's no conversation in business or policy that's more central, ubiquitous, sort of urgent than the question of AI, how it'll affect jobs and productivity. I mean, it's even almost like a family table conversation at this point.
Yes.
So we're going to get into that, and would really look forward to hearing some of your perspectives. And so I know that you OpenAI does a lot of research into this. Obviously, you care a lot about the sort of the responsibility of what you're doing. And I think there's a recent study that showed that 81% of work-related ChatGPT sort of prompts or usage was around two activities. One, getting and interpreting information, and the second one, making decisions and solving problems. So question for you, if the near-term growth comes from enabling those tasks rather than, in theory, replacing jobs, what's the playbook that CEOs, leaders, policy leaders should follow in the next year?
So, I mean, the reason we wrote this paper is to try to inform sort of leaders and organizations for how to think about how AI was going to change their firms, but also how it was going to change the job market. And when I came into the job, I mean, the question I had is the question I wanted to answer in this paper with our co-authors, including an external co-author, David Deming at Harvard, who worked with us. And the question was, how do people use ChatGPT? And you might say, what a dumb economist. He's going to spend all this time. I could just tell him how I use ChatGPT. But actually, you might not exactly tell me how you use ChatGPT. And being able to use classifiers, not reading the messages, and understand the essence of what people are using this tool, which really has no precedent in so many ways, right? Because there's not actually something that ChatGPT is designed to do. When you build a product, you're a product manager, you say, are people using it to get the value that I thought they would get from it? With ChatGPT, there's no thesis necessarily of the only thing you need to do with it. There's many things you can do. So I wrote this paper to try to figure it out. And what we found was there are really three top use cases right now in terms of our platform. Our platform has about 800 million weekly active users. So when you're reading about other studies like this, I think it's important to think of us as sort of like the largest. 10% of the population is using ChatGPT. And so we're going to give you a more representative view of what the world is doing. So you shouldn't think necessarily as much about specialists, let's say coding tasks or something in healthcare. You should be thinking about the entire market. That's what we're trying to do with this large sample. So what we found is that the number one use cases are seeking information, going out and trying to find the answer to something, right? Sometimes people use web search for that. They're also using AI. The second thing is practical guidance, right? Guidance is really important to make choices in the economy. That's not going to show up in GDP, but it's going to help you make a better decision. And we call that consumer surplus, which there's enormous consumer surplus from ChatGPT. And the last one is writing. As a dad of three, I was a little nervous to see writing. When I think about my kids in school, I don't want them outsourcing their essays to ChatGPT. But 2/3 of writing right now is people submitting things they've already written and trying to improve them or summarize them. And so when I saw that, I stopped thinking about my kids and started thinking about my parents who were immigrants because, man, if they would have had an editor to help them write like a better cover letter or negotiate a raise with their boss as people who, wasn't their first language in English, that could be really useful. And I think what you're seeing with writing is a lot of people, sort of improving what they write. And I'm already seeing that in terms of emails and notes I'm getting from people from all around the world.
Fascinating. So let's talk about I know that you have some interesting data on the narrative between replacement versus enablement, and would love to hear your thoughts on that. But also that most organizations are still using AI primarily to reduce either time saved or cost reduction. And I'd love to know what metrics you think are the best to actually capture whether AI is raising the quality of work as opposed to some of those other metrics I mentioned.
Well, this is going back, Justin, to that dinner table conversation that people have on AI, which is AI going to take my job? Is it going to replace me? And that is reflected in a lot of the discussions that we're having globally around AI and in the media. I think what we're finding right now, and this is honestly not surprising for a lot of economists who studied technology in the past, is it's more of a complement to workers. It's more of an accelerant to what you're doing rather than a substitute. And we can go maybe at another time deeper into why that's the case. But what we're finding is it's a decision support tool. It's a co-pilot. It's someone helping you make a better decision, not doing your whole task end to end. There's a couple reasons for that. One is humans are pretty flexible. We've gone through a lot of different technological revolutions. And just because you can write down the list of tasks in my job today and say, AI can do that, doesn't mean that AI will do that. It also doesn't mean that once AI does this, and this goes back to your firm question, I might add a whole bunch of other things to the task list. My dad is an economist too, and if you look at the list of tasks he did in 1985 and what I do today, completely different job. And that's true for a lot of different professions. And so as technology changes, what we do at work also changes. Inside firms, there's obviously a focus of how we're going to get people to save time and money. But a lot of firms are using this for new value creation. So you think about drug discovery. If you're a research scientist trying to come up with a new drug, you have to make novel combinations. Science is like an endless hallway with all these doors on either side, and a scientist has to choose where she's going to open the door and look behind and spend her career. AI helps us decide what problems to solve and which doors to go behind and where to spend your career. And so I feel like you're going to see a lot more firms in the innovation space and otherwise developing new products and services. That will ultimately be the measure of the value creation that comes from AI, and that will be a much more powerful accelerant of GDP and other top-line economic indicators.
And is that going to be after the time saving and the cost reduction, just naturally? I mean,
when you see how companies use it first, it's a lot like how humans use it first. We have a natural way of interacting with the chatbot. We ask it a bunch of questions. Then we start to say, could this thing book my airplane ticket? Could it plan my whole vacation? Actually, I could do an end-to-end workflow with this. It takes a little time, right? And we're all figuring that out. And I will say, as someone who has trained a lot of people to use ChatGPT, not all of it's always obvious. It's the same thing in firms. You start with the things you're already doing, the existing workflows, filing an expense report. You apply ChatGPT to that. But eventually, you start thinking about brand new workflows you weren't doing before, or really re-engineering what you were doing in a fundamental way. And that takes change management and leadership from the top, which is my advice to a lot of CEOs. If you want to take this seriously, you have to have a change management plan to go along with your AI implementation plan. And that's how we're going to unlock the value creation. Leading firms are doing that, and you'll see a lot more, I think, over the course of the next year or two.
So just exactly to that point, it's almost like there's a whole new vocabulary, a whole new sort of way of talking about this or understanding human behavior. And I know you've done studies about this notion of two types of prompts, like an asking or an asking prompt versus a doing.
Yeah.
And would love to hear more about that, and especially get a sense is AI better at asking or doing, and what qualifies an asking or a doing prompt?
Sure. 3 kinds of prompts that you'll see: asking, doing, and expressing. Asking and doing are by far the most prevalent. And right now, asking is ahead of doing. And I think that reflects the idea that the agentic capabilities of AI are still developing, and many people are learning how to use them. If you saw what we did at Dev Day, we released sort of a new agent kit that will allow people to do things, particularly small businesses and entrepreneurs, that we really never could do before. And that's going to, I think, change the way people use it to do or accomplish tasks. When I classify messages, I might think about asking as basically trying to ask a question, like what is the capital of Nevada, and getting an answer. Doing says, go do this thing for me and output a spreadsheet, maybe using a tool. As people get more comfortable with AI, they trust AI more, and they understand the capabilities, I think doing will probably start to rival asking in a more serious way. You also might have some combination, ask, then do, then ask again, that we can pick up from multiple turn prompts.
And so what percentage is asking versus doing at this point? Is it?
Yeah, I would say if you think about over a third of the messages are still asking, with doing very close behind. It depends on which sample window you look at. When we did the paper, it's changed a little bit since then, but the doing is something I think is going to increase over time. That's one that we're watching closely.
So just one last question. Obviously, everyone's concerned about sort of inclusion and making sure AI is available to all sections of society and so on. And small companies in particular, small firms, public agencies sometimes lag in AI adoption. But I think some of the research you've done has suggested they have the most to gain.
For sure.
And so if you were advising like a small business owner or, I don't know, a mayor of a small town, something like that, what's like a pilot project we recommend? How would they use ChatGPT and OpenAI to improve service quality or get other benefits?
I think about the mayor of the small town I grew up in, and they'd always say, hey, we need another person in marketing or comms to tell the story of our town, right? And it's a real thing. But it was hard to hire that person, and it was seen as a luxury. Well, with ChatGPT, and this is the element I think people are missing, a lot of times we don't necessarily have the humans lined up or we can't afford them to do that kind of work. In this case, like if you're a small town mayor, you can create sort of a whole marketing comms plan yourself. And we've seen this with small business owners. Sometimes they say, well, I can't afford to hire another person to do this, or I need a consultant to help me with business strategy, but I can't afford one of these expensive management consulting firms. Now you can do these things yourself and complement your skills. And maybe teach yourself to ask different questions, and maybe then you will procure a service provider when the time comes. So I feel like there's an opportunity to expand the aperture for small business owners, someone who is in a small town is trying to get something done. You may not have the funds to hire a whole new person, but you might be able to use AI to go part of the way and answer some questions you couldn't otherwise.
And how do you, I mean, that's obviously an incredible opportunity.
Huge.
How do you accelerate that? I mean, is that policy? Is that businesses?
We need much more training on how to use AI and its capabilities. One thing I realized, when you work at the organization, you realize you work with a bunch of 25-year-olds who like teach you how to use it. And that's what everybody needs. I wish I could give that gift to everybody. I sit with a bunch of 25-year-olds who teach me how to use ChatGPT and the API and Codex and Sora and everything else. And when I go around the country and do like workshops and seminars with people, I try to say, hey, there's this really good thing called deep research. This was before it was bundled in GPT-5. And a lot of people who could really benefit from deep research don't use it, don't know it's there. And so I think the training can help unlock it. We do have to work together, though, with workforce development boards, educational institutions to figure out what the right stuff to teach is and what's durable. Like a year ago, everybody was telling me, we got to teach prompt engineering. And I was a little bit skeptical, but I thought, okay, now ChatGPT can write your prompts. We don't need to teach that. We need to figure out something that is durable when it comes to AI skills, and that's why we're launching a program called OpenAI Certified to deliver those skills, make sure people have assessed a certain level of quality, and hopefully match them with jobs that require those skills. And so that's something OpenAI is doing, and we've worked with a lot of partners to do that, including Walmart. And so I think those are the kind of initiatives I expect a lot of different organizations to get involved in.
Great. Well, listen, fascinating. Good luck with your travels and this important work. And thank you very much for partnering with Semafor on this event.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Great to be here. Thank you.